That FBI Director Kash Patel may be out of a job in the coming months. 3 people with knowledge of the situation say President Trump and his top aides have grown tired of Patel and the unflattering headlines he's been generating recently, including using a government jet to visit his girlfriend and enlisting a SWAT team.
FBI Director Kash Patel just conceded defeat, and sources suggest this stunning collapse reveals what happens when loyalty can't substitute for competence. We're not talking about formal resignation announcement or traditional admission of failure. We're talking about reports that Patel has been forced to admit past FBI errors on Epstein case, acknowledge legal constraints he claimed didn't exist, and watch his credibility evaporate as judges reject his explanations and lawmakers threaten contempt. That multiple outlets are reporting Patel privately told people he's considering resignation despite public denials. That his signature promise of releasing Epstein files has failed spectacularly, with most documents remaining sealed months after his appointment. And what might make this moment so significant is how it exposes Trump's personnel strategy. When you hire based on loyalty rather than ability, when you pick people who talk tough but can't navigate complex legal challenges, when your FBI director becomes liability rather than asset, that's not just one failed appointment. That could be preview of systematic incompetence plaguing entire administration heading into midterm elections, where voters might punish pattern of broken promises. But before we break down how Patel went from promising transparency to making excuses for continued cover-ups and why this failure reflects badly on Trump's judgment, real quick, you cannot trust mainstream media to explain that Patel's defeat isn't about one scandal, but rather pattern of big promises followed by retreat when reality sets in. That's why we built John Brown Show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want analysis that actually connects Patel's Epstein files disaster to broader failures of Trump appointees who prioritize loyalty over competence, hit that subscribe button right now. All right, let's get into what Patel's concession actually looks like and why sources suggest it represents new form of political defeat. Because he hasn't formally resigned. He hasn't given tearful press conference admitting mistakes. He's still technically FBI director, but he's been forced to acknowledge constraints on his power, admit past institutional failures, and accept that promises he made about transparency can't be delivered. Think about what that means. Patel came into job promising to release everything about Epstein, to expose deep state cover-ups, to restore trust in Bureau. That was his entire brand and justification for appointment. But months later, files remain mostly sealed. His legal explanations get rejected by judges, lawmakers threaten him with contempt, and public no longer believes his excuses. Sources suggest when you're still holding title but have lost all credibility and effectiveness, when judges are overruling you and Congress is threatening sanctions, when your core promise has failed and everyone knows it, that's defeat even without resignation letter. And it might actually be worse than resigning, because at least resignation ends story. Staying means scandals keep piling up and every day becomes reminder of failure. Let's start with Patel's signature promise, because sources suggest Epstein files represent his most catastrophic failure. Reports indicate Patel was appointed specifically to deliver transparency on this case. He promised during confirmation process that he would release everything showing who was involved with Epstein and why previous administrations protected them. That was his mandate from Trump and selling point to base who desperately wanted accountability. But then nothing happened. Months went by with no releases. And when people started asking why, Patel had excuses. Think about legal barriers he cited. Sources suggest Patel claimed court orders prevented releases, that old plea deals and non-prosecution agreements tied his hands, that legal technicalities made transparency impossible. And initially, some people believed him, thinking maybe there really are constraints we don't understand. But then judges started weighing in. Reports indicate what they said was devastating. Patel's interpretation of law is questionable. Court orders he's citing don't necessarily prevent all disclosure. There are ways to release information with proper redactions. And if Patel really wanted to push boundaries, he could file motions asking judges to modify existing orders, but he hasn't done that. And there's congressional testimony from September where Patel went on offensive instead of being contrite. Sources suggest he told lawmakers, "I don't give a damn what they say about me." and insisted FBI had released more Epstein files than previous administrations. He blamed past decisions for current constraints. Reports indicate he basically dared Congress to hold him in contempt if they didn't like his answers. That's not someone admitting defeat. That's someone fighting. But he's losing because lawmakers weren't satisfied and judges weren't convinced. Think about what Patel actually admitted, though. Buried in all that defiance, sources suggest he said original error in Epstein case was manner in which it was initially addressed. He acknowledged that if he'd been director back then, investigation would have been broader. Reports indicate that's conceding institutional failure, admitting FBI screwed up, and that even now with Patel in charge, those past failures still limit what can be done. So he's been forced to admit he can't fix problems he was hired to fix. That's defeat, even if he won't call it that. But let's examine how Patel's excuses evolved, because sources suggest pattern reveals he either couldn't deliver or wasn't willing to do work required. Initially, his explanations were plausible. Reports indicate he would go on Fox News saying, "I want to release everything but court orders prevent me," or "I'm working with DOJ to figure out what we can legally make public." For while people accepted that thinking he's trying, it's just complicated. But months passed with nothing changing, and people started asking why Patel wasn't going to court to challenge orders, or asking Congress for legislation giving him more authority. Think about what that questioning revealed. Sources suggest people began suspecting maybe Patel's not actually trying hard. Maybe he's using legal constraints as excuse to avoid doing something politically dangerous, because releasing Epstein files means potentially implicating powerful people who might retaliate. Reports indicate it's easier to claim your hands are tied than to take on that fight. And when lawmakers pushed him on specific court orders during testimony, demanded to see exact legal provisions preventing releases, asked for internal memos showing FBI's efforts to challenge restrictions, Patel got defensive and combative, but didn't provide detailed justification they were asking for. And there's what judges said afterward. Sources suggest their public statements were damning. They indicated Patel was overstating legal constraints, that he could be doing more but wasn't pursuing it aggressively. Reports indicate when judges publicly say FBI director is either incompetent or deliberately using legal excuses to avoid transparency, that destroys credibility. It means everything Patel claimed about being unable to release files might be excuse rather than legitimate barrier. And once that perception takes hold, sources suggest recovery is impossible because public assumes you're covering something up. Share this video with everyone you know because there's broader implication. If Patel can't or won't deliver on signature promise that defined his appointment, what's point of him being in job? Sources suggest that's question people are asking, including reportedly people close to Trump. Reports indicate when your FBI director becomes reminder of broken promises rather than symbol of transparency, he's liability dragging down entire administration heading into midterms, where Republicans need to convince voters they're governing effectively. But Epstein files aren't only thing dragging Patel down. Sources suggest there are questions about his personal use of FBI aircraft for trips that weren't clearly related to bureau business. When confronted, reports indicate Patel's explanation was vague. He said all travel was authorized and necessary but didn't provide detailed justifications or release flight logs. That feeds narrative he thinks he's above accountability because he's Trump's guy. And for someone supposed to be restoring trust in FBI, sources suggest that's devastating. Think about his comments on political violence. Patel made statements that critics say suggest certain forms of resistance to government overreach might be justified. While he claims he was taken out of context, reports indicate those comments have been weaponized against him by people arguing he's encouraging extremism. In context of January 6th and ongoing concerns about political violence, sources suggest those kinds of statements are radioactive. They make Patel look reckless and give Democrats ammunition to argue FBI under his leadership isn't focused on preventing violence, but rather has become politicized and partisan. And there's Minneapolis connection. Even though Patel isn't directly responsible for ICE shootings, sources suggest broader climate of aggressive enforcement and lack of accountability falls partly on law enforcement leadership. Reports indicate Patel as FBI director is part of that leadership. When people are angry about Kristi Noem and DHS, some of that anger splashes onto Patel too because message from Trump's administration has been we're cracking down hard and not apologizing. Patel defended aggressive tactics and pushed back against oversight. But Minneapolis showed what happens when law enforcement operates without adequate oversight. Sources suggest Americans die, officials lie about it, public loses trust, and all of that makes Patel's tough-on-crime rhetoric look hollow. Share this with everyone because there's resignation rumors significance. Multiple outlets reported Patel privately told people he's considering stepping down despite public denials. Sources suggest that means people close to him, people who know what he's thinking, believe he's considering it. Reports indicate that tells you pressure is real. Behind tough public statements, Patel might be struggling, exhausted, frustrated, realizing staying in job could be more painful than leaving. And even if he ultimately decides to stay, sources suggest mere existence of resignation rumors damages him because it makes him look weak, like he's thinking about quitting. In Trump world where strength and loyalty are everything, looking weak might be almost as bad as actually being weak. But step back and consider what Patel's failure reveals about Trump's personnel strategy, because sources suggest this isn't an isolated problem. Kristi Noem facing impeachment over Minneapolis, other Trump officials under investigation or facing scandals. Reports indicate pattern is clear. Trump values loyalty over competence. He picks people who will defend him, not people who can actually do job. And in short term that works because loyal people take bullets for you, go on TV and defend policies no matter what. But in long term, sources suggest it's disaster. Think about why incompetent people can't deliver results. They can't navigate complex legal and political challenges. They can't build coalitions needed to pass legislation or implement policy. Reports indicate you end up with administration full of people who talk tough but accomplish nothing. And that's where Trump is right now. His people are loyal, but they're failing, and those failures are piling up. Sources suggest every Patel failure reflects on Trump. Every time Patel gets criticized by judge or grilled by Congress or caught in scandal, it reinforces narrative that Trump doesn't know how to pick good people, that his administration is chaotic and incompetent, that loyalty isn't substitute for ability. And there's midterm implications. Heading into 2026, sources suggest Republicans need to convince voters that Trump's second term is different from his first, that he's learned, that he's governing effectively. But Patel's failures, combined with Noem's scandal, combined with Venezuela, combined with all other controversies, tell different story. Reports indicate they tell story of administration just as messy as before, just as scandal-prone, just as unable to deliver on promises. That's not winning message for midterms. When Democrats can point to Patel and say, look what happens when you prioritize loyalty over competence, look what happens when transparency is just talking point instead of actual policy, sources suggest that resonates with voters tired of broken promises. Make sure you're subscribed to Patrick Smith Show because there's what happens next question. Either Patel resigns or he stays and continues failing. If he resigns, reports indicate Trump has to find replacement who can actually do job. Someone with credibility who can rebuild trust. But sources suggest Trump might not have someone like that in his orbit because most of his people are loyalists, not reformers, just people who will defend him no matter what. So even if Patel leaves, next person might have same problems. But if Patel stays, sources suggest failures continue, scandals pile up, credibility erodes further. By 2026, FBI becomes another weapon Democrats can use against Trump, pointing to what happens when you put someone in charge who can't deliver. So here's what Patel's concession reveals. FBI director promised releasing Epstein files and exposing deep state cover-ups, but months later, most documents remained sealed. Judges rejected his legal explanations, saying he's overstating constraints. Lawmakers threatened contempt after testimony where he got defensive instead of providing detailed justifications. Multiple outlets reported he's privately considering resignation despite public denials. Questions about personal use of FBI aircraft and comments on political violence further damaged credibility. Sources suggest this represents new form of defeat where someone holds title while losing all effectiveness. When you can't deliver on core promise, when judges overrule you and Congress threatens sanctions, when public no longer believes excuses, that's conceding defeat even without resignation letter. Question is whether this pattern of Trump appointees who talk tough but can't navigate reality continues destroying Republican credibility heading into midterms, or whether administration finally prioritizes competence over loyalty before electoral consequences become catastrophic. Stay tuned.